What if losing your home wasn't about bad choices, but broken systems? Every night, thousands sleep rough on UK streets. But the truth behind this crisis is deeper than most realize. It's not just addiction or unemployment. It's rising rents, failed policies, and safety nets that no longer catch anyone. In this video, we uncover 10 shocking reasons why homelessness is exploding across the UK. Some will challenge everything you thought you knew. If you think this doesn't affect you, think again. Watch to the end, because the final reason may change how you see government decisions forever. Number 10. Policy failure and political apathy. Behind every tent on a pavement and every person sleeping on a bench is a bigger issue. Policy failure. The rise in homelessness across the UK isn't just a series of unfortunate personal stories. It's the result of political decisions made over years. Think tanks like the Institute for Public Policy Research, IPPR, and charities such as Crisis have repeatedly stated that homelessness is not inevitable. It is the product of deliberate underfunding, lack of coordination between services, and a failure to prioritize housing as a human right rather than a market commodity. While governments have promised action, many pledges remain unfulfilled or watered down by other agendas. There's been no shortage of reports, inquiries, or white papers, but real, systemic change remains elusive. For example, the long-promised abolition of Section 21 evictions continues to be delayed. Affordable housing targets are frequently missed or quietly lowered. Meanwhile, rough sleeping figures rise, and local councils are forced to make impossible choices with shrinking budgets. Housing ministers change frequently, and homelessness rarely stays on the agenda long enough to inspire action. Short-term fixes, such as emergency shelters or hotel placements during crises like the pandemic, may temporarily reduce visible homelessness, but they don't solve the root causes. True progress requires more than promises. It requires political will, public pressure, and bold structural reform. That means increasing investment in social housing, restoring funding to support services, and rethinking how we treat housing in legislation. It also means listening to those with lived experience, not just professionals in boardrooms. The system doesn't need tweaks, it needs transformation. Homelessness is not about personal failure. It's about a society that chooses not to protect its most vulnerable members. Until policymakers treat this as a national emergency, the crisis will continue. People won't stop losing their homes until leaders start making housing a real priority, not just a talking point. Number 9. Prison and care system discharges. Every year, thousands of individuals are released from prisons or exit the care system without a safe or stable place to go. This sudden transition is a critical moment when people are most vulnerable to homelessness. According to the Inspectorate of Probation, around 30% of people leaving prison have nowhere secure to live, and many leave with just a small grant, a travel ticket, and a list of shelters, not a long-term housing plan. For those exiting the care system at age 18, the shift from supported environments to complete independence often happens with little preparation and minimal support. When someone is released from prison without housing, their chances of reoffending increase dramatically. Without a fixed address, it's nearly impossible to find a job, open a bank account, or even register with a GP. The lack of coordination between housing services, probation officers, and local councils means that many fall through the cracks. Some find temporary beds in hostels or overcrowded shelters, but others end up on the streets within days. The same is true for care leavers, many of whom have no family support, no income, and limited life skills. What should be a fresh start becomes a fast track to destitution. This issue is not about individual failure, it's a failure of transition planning and aftercare. Prisons and care institutions are not designed to prepare people for independent living, yet that's exactly what's expected upon release. Government guidelines call for resettlement plans, but these are often rushed, underfunded, or ignored altogether. A more humane system would ensure that every person leaving prison or care has a secure home, access to support services, and a chance to reintegrate into society. Without these basics, people are being set up to fail before they even begin. Homelessness, after state care or incarceration, is not just preventable. It's a sign that the system has left its most vulnerable people behind. Number 8. Austerity and council funding cuts. The impact of austerity measures on homelessness in the UK cannot be overstated. Since 2010, successive governments have implemented sweeping budget cuts to local councils, social care, and housing services. According to the Local Government Association, councils in England have lost over £15 billion in core funding over the last decade. These cuts have forced many councils to shut down homeless shelters, reduce mental health services, and scale back early intervention programs. The result: thousands of vulnerable people now face longer waits, fewer options, and more risk of being left on the streets. Local councils have traditionally played a vital role in preventing homelessness, from housing advice centres and family mediation services to emergency accommodation and outreach teams. These services once acted as a first line of defence, but with funding reduced or eliminated, staff numbers have dropped, and many services have become overloaded or unavailable. Some councils now rely heavily on charities to pick up the slack, but these organisations are also under pressure and cannot replace the reach or authority of properly funded public services. Without local support, many people fall through the cracks before they're even counted in homelessness statistics. Austerity doesn't just affect housing, it damages the entire social safety net. Mental health clinics, addiction treatment, youth programs, and domestic violence shelters, all of these essential services have faced closures or severe reductions. And when support systems fail, homelessness becomes inevitable. What we're seeing today is not just the result of individual hardship, but of systemic neglect. Without reversing austerity-era policies and restoring meaningful investment into council-run housing support, the homelessness crisis will continue to worsen. A country's priorities are reflected in where it spends its money, and for too long, the UK has chosen to cut where help is needed most. Safe housing is not a luxury, it's the foundation of everything else. Number 7. Cost of living crisis. The ongoing cost of living crisis in the UK has become a major driver of homelessness, impacting both low-income families and working individuals. Essentials like rent, food, energy, and transport have all seen sharp increases, while wages remain stagnant. According to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, more than 14 million people in the UK are now living in poverty, many of them in work. When every pound counts, a sudden rent increase, a boiler repair, or even a high electricity bill can be enough to push someone over the edge. It's not about laziness or bad choices, it's about simple maths that no longer adds up. The crisis is especially brutal for households already living close to the line. For example, people in part-time jobs, carers, or those on zero-hour contracts often don't earn enough to cover rising expenses. Add in rising childcare costs, transport fares, and inflation, and the result is people being forced to choose between heating their homes and paying the rent. When they fall behind, evictions follow, and the journey into homelessness begins. Even those who manage to stay housed may live in unhealthy, overcrowded conditions just to keep a roof over their heads. For many, the only option left is temporary accommodation or rough sleeping. What's even more alarming is how this crisis is affecting people who were never considered vulnerable before. Teachers, nurses, retail workers, all people once seen as secure, are now showing up at food banks and housing support centres. This shows that homelessness is no longer confined to the most disadvantaged, it's creeping into the middle class. The cost of living crisis is not just an economic issue, it's a housing emergency. Without affordable homes, fair wages, and stronger tenant protections, people will continue to fall out of the system. The price of survival shouldn't be your home. A society where full-time workers can't afford to live indoors is one in desperate need of reform. Number 6. Youth homelessness and family breakdown. Young people are among the most at-risk groups when it comes to homelessness, often falling through the cracks of both the housing and welfare systems. Many become homeless after family breakdowns, where conflict, neglect, or abuse pushes them out of the home. According to Centrepoint, over 29,000 young people in the UK approached local authorities for help with homelessness last year. These aren't just teenagers sleeping rough. Many are sofa surfing, moving between temporary arrangements with friends, relatives, or even strangers. The lack of stable housing affects everything from education to mental health and future employment. For young people leaving care homes or the foster system, the situation can be even more fragile. Once they turn 18, many are expected to live independently, often without adequate preparation or support. With no financial safety net, limited job prospects, and a shortage of affordable housing, many care leavers end up on the streets or in emergency hostels. Some face discrimination from landlords, while others are unable to secure housing benefits quickly enough to avoid eviction. Without intervention, youth homelessness can quickly turn into long-term homelessness, affecting an entire generation's future. What makes youth homelessness particularly heartbreaking is how invisible it often is. Unlike older adults sleeping rough, many young people hide their situation, attending school, going to work, all while not having a bed of their own. They may not be counted in official statistics, which means they're also less likely to receive the help they need. Youth services, once a lifeline for at-risk teens, have faced deep funding cuts, leaving few places for young people to turn in times of crisis. Tackling youth homelessness requires more than shelters. It needs family mediation, education support, job training, and secure housing pathways for vulnerable young people. Every young person deserves the chance to grow, learn, and build a future, not be left behind simply because they had no safe place to call home. Number 5. Domestic abuse. Domestic abuse is a powerful and often hidden force behind rising homelessness in the UK. Every year, thousands of individuals, mostly women and children, flee abusive households in search of safety. But leaving home doesn't always mean finding refuge. According to Women's Aid, almost 60% of victims are turned away from refuges due to lack of space. With nowhere else to go, many survivors end up in temporary accommodation, sofa surfing, or even sleeping rough. Escaping abuse often means giving up financial stability, personal belongings, and the comfort of familiar surroundings, all in the name of survival. The support system for domestic abuse survivors is stretched thin. Refuges are underfunded, and services are often not equipped to deal with complex trauma, mental health issues, or victims with children. In rural areas, help may not exist at all. Some victims are also afraid to seek help because of immigration status, language barriers, or fear of losing custody of their children. Those who do find shelter may only be allowed to stay for a limited time before being forced to move on, often without any guarantee of long-term housing. This instability can keep survivors trapped in cycles of violence and vulnerability. What makes this issue especially tragic is that the choice between staying and leaving is often a choice between danger and homelessness. Government funding cuts to domestic violence services and local councils have made it harder than ever for survivors to access emergency help. Survivors need more than just a bed for the night. They need wraparound support, trauma-informed care, and access to safe, affordable housing where they can start fresh. Without these essential resources, many return to their abusers or fall into long-term homelessness. Tackling domestic abuse as a root cause of homelessness requires a nationwide commitment to protect, house, and support those trying to escape violence. Safety shouldn't come at the cost of stability, and no one should have to choose between being harmed or being homeless. Number 4. Mental health struggles. Mental health plays a crucial role in the homelessness crisis, both as a cause and as a consequence. For many people experiencing homelessness, issues like depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and schizophrenia are part of daily life. According to research by NHS England, over 80% of homeless individuals have a mental health condition, compared to just 25% in the general population. Yet support systems are often inaccessible, underfunded, or designed in ways that are difficult for vulnerable people to navigate. Without proper treatment, managing life's pressures, from employment to relationships, becomes nearly impossible. Once someone becomes homeless, their mental health usually deteriorates further. The stress of not knowing where you'll sleep, the fear of being attacked, and the loss of routine or purpose can be emotionally crippling. Many turn to alcohol or drugs as a form of self-medication, which in turn can worsen their condition and make it harder to access services. It's a cycle that becomes harder to break the longer someone remains on the street. Emergency shelters often lack the resources and trained staff to provide meaningful mental health support, and even NHS services have long waiting lists or strict eligibility criteria. Compounding this issue is the stigma surrounding both mental illness and homelessness. People experiencing both are often seen as difficult or dangerous, leading to social exclusion and a lack of empathy from the public. Outreach teams and charities like Mind in Crisis work tirelessly to bridge this gap, but they can't replace a robust, national system. To reduce homelessness, the UK must invest in early intervention, community-based mental health care, and integrated housing support. Treating mental health is not just about therapy or medication. It's about giving people the security, dignity, and structure they need to rebuild their lives. Ignoring this aspect means continuing a cycle of neglect that leaves thousands with no place. Number 3. No-fault evictions. Section 21. One of the most overlooked drivers of homelessness in the UK is the use of Section 21, also known as no-fault evictions. This legal mechanism allows private landlords to evict tenants with just 2 months' notice, without having to provide any reason. For many renters, this creates a constant sense of instability and fear, knowing they can be removed from their home even if they've paid rent on time and followed all the rules. According to Shelter, no-fault evictions are now one of the leading causes of homelessness in England, especially in major cities where housing competition is fierce. The problem isn't just the eviction itself, it's what happens next. With rents rising rapidly, people evicted under Section 21 often struggle to find a new place they can afford. Many end up in temporary accommodation, staying with friends, or forced into emergency shelters. Families with children are particularly affected, as school stability and community ties are suddenly disrupted. The emotional and psychological toll of being evicted for no reason, with little time to prepare, is often devastating. For people already living on the edge, this type of eviction is enough to push them directly into street homelessness. Although the government has repeatedly promised to abolish Section 21, the process has been delayed and reform proposals remain stuck in Parliament. Meanwhile, landlords continue to use this law as a tool to raise rents, sell properties, or simply move on from tenants they no longer want. Renters have few rights to challenge these evictions, and legal aid is difficult to access. Without proper protections in place, tenants are left vulnerable in a market that increasingly favours property owners over people. The result? Thousands of people become homeless, not because of wrongdoing, but because the system allows it. Ending no-fault evictions is not just about housing law, it's about restoring dignity, fairness, and stability to millions of renters across the UK. Number 2. Cuts to welfare benefits. Over the past decade, the UK has experienced significant cuts to welfare support, leaving thousands of vulnerable individuals unable to meet their basic living needs. One of the biggest changes came with the rollout of universal credit, which replaced 6 existing benefits with a single monthly payment. While the goal was to simplify the system, the reality has been far more damaging. According to Crisis UK, delays in payments, deductions, and sanctions have directly pushed people into homelessness. The 5-week wait for the first payment leaves many in debt before they've even begun, and emergency support isn't always enough to cover rent or utilities. Those most affected include people with disabilities, single parents, and those already living in poverty. The benefit cap, which limits how much support a household can receive regardless of rent costs, often leaves families short. For example, if someone loses their job unexpectedly, they might not be able to access the full support they need in time to avoid eviction. Local housing allowance rates, which are supposed to reflect real rental costs, are frozen or outdated, meaning they rarely match actual rent prices in most areas. This mismatch forces people to either cover the gap from already stretched budgets or face losing their home. These cuts reflect a wider shift in government policy that treats welfare more as a privilege than a lifeline. The stigma around receiving help leads many to avoid claiming benefits altogether. Meanwhile, frontline organisations like food banks, citizens' advice centres, and homeless charities are overwhelmed trying to fill the gap. Without strong safety nets, one small setback, a job loss, illness, or unexpected bill can spiral into a housing crisis. Homelessness is not just a housing issue, it's a welfare issue, and without restoring adequate, accessible support, more people will continue to fall through the cracks. Number 1. Lack of affordable housing. The UK's housing crisis isn't just about not having enough homes, it's about homes that people can no longer afford to live in. Over the last decade, house prices and private rents have skyrocketed, especially in urban areas like London, Manchester and Bristol. According to Shelter, over 8 million people in England are currently living in unaffordable, insecure, or unsuitable housing. This includes people stuck in overcrowded flats, paying more than 50% of their income on rent, or living in temporary accommodation. The government's failure to build enough social and truly affordable housing has created a massive gap between need and availability. Many working individuals, including those with full-time jobs, are still unable to access stable housing. Wages have not kept pace with inflation or rent increases, meaning more and more people are being priced out of their local areas. For single-parent families, young people and pensioners, this struggle is even more pronounced. Housing benefit often doesn't cover market rents, leaving people to make impossible choices between food, heating, or keeping a roof over their heads. The lack of rent controls, combined with growing demand, gives landlords the power to increase rents without accountability. This leads to more evictions, more people entering temporary shelters, and ultimately, more people sleeping rough. The shortage of affordable homes isn't accidental. It's the result of decades of underinvestment, deregulation, and a shift toward housing as an investment asset rather than a basic human need. Many new developments focus on luxury apartments that remain unoccupied, while council waiting lists grow longer each year. Without urgent reforms in housing policy, building standards, and local authority funding, the number of people facing homelessness will continue to rise. The UK cannot solve its homelessness crisis without first tackling the root problem: the growing gap between the cost of housing and what people can realistically afford. Homelessness in the UK is not just about people on the streets. It's a reflection of how broken the system has become, from rising rents to failing welfare, from mental health struggles to political inaction. Every layer of this crisis exposes a society that has stopped protecting its most vulnerable. What makes it worse is that most of these causes are preventable. These are not isolated incidents. They are the result of decades of policy choices, economic shifts, and services that no longer meet people's real needs. We've seen that homelessness is not just a housing issue, it's a crisis tied to mental health, domestic abuse, youth support, and basic human dignity. And it doesn't just impact those we see on the streets. It affects entire communities, our health systems, our economy, and ultimately, our humanity. Solving this crisis will take more than charity. It will take political courage, public awareness, and collective pressure to demand better from those in power. Because if we accept this as normal, it will only get worse. This video is just one step toward understanding the bigger picture, and hopefully, inspiring action that leads to real change. If this video opened your eyes, check out our previous deep dive right here. We put a huge amount of time and care into making videos like this, so please support us by subscribing. It's just one click, but it means everything to us. Thank you for watching.